So for today, the Blind Ambition podcast with David Cohen. He is the founder and CEO of Techstars. And I'm going to put it to you, Dave, to give a little explanation of what Techstars is all about, because from my understanding, you guys are doing great stuff. You have tons of jobs on your job board. You're minting wealth all over the place. So maybe you could share a little bit what it's about and how, what people should know about it.
Sure. Well, thanks, Jack, and great, and thanks for inviting me onto the show. This is awesome. Techstars, look, at a high level, we are a very, very active global seed investor in startups. So we invest in a couple of people, a dog, and an idea, right? Where they want to create something that's going to change the world. And examples of that are companies that range from ones you've heard of, like Uber, right, where we were the first investors in the angel round of that company, to companies like PillPack that this is my daily meds that I take. It comes in a little pack of pills, and it's a $1 billion company that Amazon bought, but it started as a tiny little company of a couple of guys with an idea. Most of them have a dog. I don't know why. Not all of them. Not required. And we invest a little bit of money in them, and we work with them for 3 months in a really hands-on way, surround them with lots of mentors, and then try to help them raise capital. And they go on to hopefully create a big company. And we've done that with about 5,000 companies now around the world. So we operate all over the world in about 16 countries, make about 500 new investments every year. And those companies go on to hire lots of people. As you mentioned, those companies are always looking for great people that can join them and help them grow. So that's what we do in a nutshell.
So how does it work? So, you mentioned like two people and a dog and a cat, what have you. Do you register with Techstars and say, I have an idea? Do they need a full, plan and pitch deck? Or can they just say to you or someone on your team, hey, I have this great idea. What do I do now?
Yeah, so they go to our website at techstars.com and they apply.
Mhm.
And the application takes anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on how much you want to tell us. And it doesn't require a formal business plan. Look, we only do invest in tech companies. So these are software, internet kinds of companies. We're not investing in, a new restaurant concept or a flower shop. These are tech companies, hence Techstars. But it's a pretty simple application that they fill out. And usually, as I said, it's a few people with an idea. They don't have much more than that. And what sets Techstars apart from most of the venture capital or private equity investors out there is our willingness to bet early on a couple of people with an idea, right? And so it doesn't take a whole lot. It's pretty easy to do, and you do it online.
This is one thing I've interviewed a lot of VCs, venture capitalists. How do you know to to invest in Uber compared to something else? Because to be very honest, if you came with me with the idea of Uber, growing up, my parents would say, don't go into a car with a stranger. And now I go into a car with a stranger. How do you figure it out that this could be the
Yeah.
one that's going to be like, a unicorn company?
I love this because I could sit here and tell you how smart I am and that we just figured
Do
out,
it,
but we
sure.
have plenty that fail too, right, Jack? So it's not like they all work. But I am a huge believer in that instinct that you're having being a sign that you should dig deeper. So I've found in my career, I've been investing in startups for 20 years, that the most interesting things to invest in usually sound like a bad idea, but actually are a good idea. And so think of the Venn diagram, sounds like a bad idea, and the small little overlap with, well, actually is a good
Yeah.
idea. That little overlap is where I look as an investor with a long view, a 10, 20-year view, not a 1 or 2 year view, but a sort of multi-decade view. How could the world be different? What if people could rent out the spare bedroom in your house? That sounds like a terrible idea.
I would have passed on that too. I got to admit,
Terrible.
I must admit.
Why is it a good idea, right? What makes it a good idea? There are actually people that need a little extra money, and there are actually people that like to travel and have these personal
Mhm.
experiences to use someone's spare bedroom. And turns out that's a huge market and grows into something even bigger. And when I think about the 21 unicorns, billion-dollar companies we've invested in, a lot of them sound like a really bad idea, but actually are a good idea. And so that should pique your interest.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the first hint, because it's the counterintuitive ones that change the world.
Would you mind maybe a couple of examples of the unicorn ones?
Sure. Yeah. I mentioned a company called PillPack.
Hmm.
This was a company that went through our Boston accelerator program. A couple of guys that thought, my family has sometimes taken the wrong medicine at the wrong time. As people get older, they're all these pill bottles and they don't take the right, and they pick the wrong medication, they take too much of something or they miss a dose. Why shouldn't, your 9 o'clock pills come in a little packet, right? That you tear open and just take those pills at that time. It takes a lot more on the front end to organize those pills into tiny little packets. It's a lot of plastic waste, right? But turns out it's a billion-dollar idea that Amazon buys, is now part of Amazon Pharmacy. Or a company like DigitalOcean, which is a company we funded in New York, that says, I think that Amazon Web Services could be better. That's the behemoth in the market. Amazon Web
Hmm.
Services is like 98% of the web infrastructure, server infrastructure business that supplies the technology for a lot of businesses to run their products online. And DigitalOcean said, well, we're going to build a company like that, but we're going to base it on love. We love our customer. It's just weird. It sounded weird. We're two brothers. We fight all the time. We literally actually fist fight all the time to resolve our issues. But we're going to create a company that customers, love. And they've created a $8 billion competitor to Amazon Web Services, which everyone thought owned the market. So sometimes it sounds crazy because there's no room in the market. Or, maybe I give you one more, a company called Zipline, right? Which wants to, this is 10 years ago, deliver products by drone, right? So you want to order a taco, they're going to drop it on your front door, right? Without any delivery. But that's way off in the future. That sounds crazy. It turns out that there's an intermediate market. They operate in Africa. They're dropping blood from hospitals to remote areas by drone and other medical supplies all over the world. And now they're building out the taco delivery
Right.
infrastructure. And it's sort of like you think of these things as like, wow, that's way too early, but they're there for a decade figuring it out. And when the market actually happens, they're the ones that are going to do it. So the stories are really varied, and a lot of them sound crazy in the beginning, but today, make a lot of sense.
So how many proposals do you go through? You don't have to give the exact number, but just do you have to wade through so many to find that like aha moment that yes, I think this is it.
So we see on the order of 20 to 25,000 applications a year. And we pick,
25,000 a year.
yeah, 20 to
Wow.
25,000, depending on the year. And it's up about 3x over 3 years ago. So it's really growing the interest in this model and getting mentorship and getting this early capital and having somebody take a chance on you before the market is ready. Um, we don't really have aha moments. That's a big myth of startup land, is that you read it and you're like, I know, like when I saw Uber, did I know it was any different than any other company? I was excited about it, but no more than a bunch that failed, right? And so the question you're really asking yourself is this a bet worth taking?
Mhm.
Do I love these people? Do they have a vision of the future? Do they have the motivation to go get it? And what if they did it? What if it worked? What could that mean in 10 or 15 years, right? Because that's the time horizon you have to think in. So, and I don't do it alone. We're hundreds of people. We have managing directors that live in London and Amsterdam and New York and LA and San Francisco and all these other places that help meet these people, screen these people, and then ultimately I see what I hope is the best of those opportunities.
And so let's say, myself and Christine have an idea. So we'll give a business plan, and then I think you mentioned you'd order mentorship and other ways to help the entrepreneurs to kind of navigate. And I imagine for a lot of people, this is the first time doing it. So you have to hold their hands and walk through. Is that kind of?
Yeah. So we then run an accelerator program. We make the
Mhm.
investment. We run a program called an accelerator program where you'll be in a cohort of 10 companies. You won't be competitive with each other. You'll have a partner from Techstars, a managing director. We call it very focused on you, but you'll have all the resources of Techstars. You'll have about 100 to 200 mentors that you'll meet. We do something called Mentor Madness, where we're just constantly listening to your idea, reacting. Our mentors who built big companies are giving feedback. You're starting to synthesize, like, what's the feedback? We want to get the arrow of your company pointed in the exact right direction before we step on the gas, right? Because if it's pointed in a little bit the
Mhm.
wrong direction, you go a long way in the wrong direction. So, it's that mentorship. It's a 3 month process of really giving you that feedback, introducing you to investors, helping you with your investor story. It's a big part of what we do to make your pitch as strong as possible. And the best way to think of Techstars is sort of like a really deeply networked co-founder, right? That knows everybody in the world, that can
Mhm.
help you, that's sort of co-founding your company with you in real partnership to try to get it off the ground, get it funded, and get it to the point where it's growing.
And from what I understand, you have a lot, a lot of success because I think on your job board, it's like what, 3,000 plus, job openings, right?
Well, right now, and obviously it's a tough market. It's as you know, a really weird market right
Yeah.
now. Um, but we have thousands of portfolio companies, and those companies are hiring and growing. And I like to remind people that essentially 100% of all the job growth in America and in most developed places in the world comes from startups. It doesn't come from big companies growing. It
Mm.
comes from tiny little companies growing. And so, it's no surprise that if I have thousands of startups, those startups currently at techstars.com/careers have thousands of jobs open. And these aren't all technical jobs. A lot of them are, programming jobs and things like that, but a lot of them are marketing or sales or, things like that. Um, so yeah, this is where jobs come from, startups. So if you're on the hunt for an opportunity today, looking in small companies is a really exciting opportunity because not only are they hiring, but often they compensate with equity, right? They give you, a tenth of 1% of the company. If that turns into the next Uber, that means a lot for you, right? And so that's the opportunity with working at a startup is not just the job opening and the growth that they're experiencing, but the opportunity to grow your financial world with them.
See, I think this is really cool for a bunch of reasons. Uh, we talked a little bit before the show that I was writing a piece for Forbes about Wall Street may lose 200,000 jobs due to AI. And then, you have all this offshoring, taking the jobs from the US to other places and so forth. So for white collar professionals, it is hard. It's brutal. And, you see in the big tech companies, they're laying off, constantly laying off, or everyone's worried about going on a PIP, a performance improvement plan, worried about it. So from when in your ecosystem, it's a little different because you have these smaller, emerging companies that need all this talent. And I think a lot of people don't realize that that even exists. So that opens the door for somebody who's like knocking their head against the wall saying, I can't freaking find a job. What do I do? This is another outlet to take a look at, right?
I hope so. Yeah. And I mean, the one way to think about it is, yeah, okay, so AI is taking all these jobs, but
Mhm.
like, who's building the AI? Right? It's the
Right.
startups, right, that are doing that. And you may say, well, I don't want to be part of that, but I don't think all AI is evil. That's a whole different conversation.
Right.
I think it can be used for a lot of good things, but these are just the types of efficiencies that are constantly happening because of innovation and technology. AIs are particularly, compelling one to talk about because there's so much going on. But yeah, these startups are the ones that are building these solutions. So the energy is just going somewhere else. And it's on some level reskilling and thinking about how do I get involved with the future, right? Instead of the past, right?
I bet you it's not as competitive compared to somebody, some just like random, like white collar person who's going on LinkedIn and sends their resume. You know, you click the button and it goes there, and then you see 700 other people apply for the same freaking job. And you're like, oh, what am I going to do? I'd imagine it's not as competitive. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would bet it's probably not as competitive that way because people aren't aware as much about, these smaller emerging companies, right? So like probably have a better chance of getting that interview.
I would say yes in general, and
Yeah.
it's a spectrum. I would say the smaller the company is, the more true that even is, right? Because
Hmm.
they're going to be less sophisticated in their ability to get the word out, ability to, have an applicant tracking system and, all of that stuff. And so it's much more just like, who's in my network and who did I hear about? It's going to be less rigorous as a process, and there's a lot more of those companies. So as they grow, right, it gets to the same weird place that it is with big companies today, where by the time you see it online, it's probably already filled, right? You got to
Hmm.
find out about it before it's even open. And one of the cool things about startups is, you know, you don't even have to wait for there to be a job opening.
Hmm.
You can just fall in love with the company and say, go to them and say, I think you should hire me. I remember hiring my first HR person in my first startup. They pitched me 20 reasons you need an HR person now. Right. And we were like, I don't know, 20 people. I didn't know I needed an HR
Yeah.
person, but she convinced me I did. Right. And so you can be entrepreneurial with the entrepreneurs.
So in other words, like you could go to like maybe the smaller company, embryonic company, and say, "Hey, I noticed you don't have like an HR person, you don't have a marketing person, or you don't have a product manager person, or a project manager. Like, hey, I'll do it. Here's my resume. Can I talk?" So
Yeah. And
you
you
could
know
and you could
what?
reach out to them directly, I imagine, instead of going through that whole hierarchy of a big
Right.
company.
That's right. And you know what? I don't even need it to be full time. Looks like you're going to grow
Yeah.
into that. I could do it halftime for you right now. I want to give first. I love what you're doing, right? Like,
Mhm.
remember that these people are really passionate about what they're doing. They took a huge risk. They're starting a entirely new business. If you actually care about the thing they're doing, you're going to bond with them pretty
Mhm.
quickly, right? And so I think you can, as a strategy right now, target startups that look like they're growing and pitch them on why you would be additive.
I like this idea. This is cool because this could help a lot of people out because it could open a door to say, "Hey, I didn't know this existed. This is cool. Let me check it out."
That's why I'm here, man.
Yeah.
Let's help a few people out.
So, hey, what are there certain themes that you see recently? And this could be for people who actually maybe who will be watching it and want to do it because there are a lot of technologists, you know, in the audience. Are there certain themes that you notice that are trending that you would say, hey, if you're looking to start your own, thing, under the umbrella of Techstars, obviously, you know, what are the things that are really hot that are growing that seem to be, have some promise?
Yeah, I mean, you won't be surprised to hear me
Yeah.
say artificial intelligence, machine learning. I
Mm.
mean, look, we have a weird dynamic in the venture
Yeah.
capital industry right now where about one in four of the companies that are getting any funding are AI companies. And I think that's understated. I think it's like half,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of companies are reacting to that by saying we're an AI company, even when they're really not. They're just consuming Chat GPT in some way and repackaging it or
Mhm.
something. But that space, for people to get skills in AI to just play around with things like Chat GPT to, you know, think about ways that it could be leveraged. Again, you may have a startup that you're really interested in that doesn't really leverage that, and you can maybe learn it and teach them how to
Mhm.
leverage it in a way that's going to double their sales, right? Like, why wouldn't they hire you? It'd be crazy not to hire you. So I think that's kind of the hot space right now. There's always others. I mean, the quantum computing, is a very deeply technical area that's going to change the world. That intersection of quantum computing and artificial intelligence is going to potentially kill us all. I hope not. But it is has the potential to easily cure cancer, has the potential to easily cause us all to live to be hundreds of years old. No encryption is safe when quantum computing exists from today's world, right? Like it's a total game changer. It's not that you can do things a million times faster, it's that you can do a million things you couldn't do before, right, with quantum computing. So that's another thing I'm super interested in. But the AI is kind of in the moment, the thing that everybody's very focused on.
Now, what happens if you're like myself, live in this suburb in New Jersey, Westfield, and it's not a tech scene, not a lot of tech players there? Is
Yeah.
there a way, if you're not in Silicon Valley or San Francisco or some of the big hubs, can you still find a way to get noticed and get involved with Techstars?
Yeah, you can. In fact, we have a product that we bring to market called a startup community partnership. And so, some people that are listening may say, "Hey, I'm in a small town." That's how I felt when I was here in Boulder, in
Mhm.
Colorado, 20 years ago. And not a lot going on, not a lot of startups here, but like I'd like it to change over time. I'd like to be a catalyst, right, for my community to have more tech startups here, to have our community be more connected to venture capital or to other communities that are growing, to more interesting job opportunities. So, startup communities are a thing that we really care a lot about at Techstars. It's our origin and our beginning and our
Mhm.
story. So, we've created a product that allows any place in the world to become a node on the Techstars network, to have a full-time person there connecting your community to the broader Techstars network portfolio of companies, to these types of jobs, to investors around the
Mhm.
world, to create bi-directional flow for your community and teaching that community how to become better over, 1 to 5, 10 years. We have events called Startup Weekend that can run in the community where people learn about entrepreneurship. We have events called Startup Week where we celebrate entrepreneurship in the community, once a year. We have things like Founder Catalyst where you can nominate your most interesting founders to be connected to other interesting
Mhm.
founders in other communities to start companies together, to get funding, right? And so this startup community partnership that we offer can work anywhere to take a community from interested, in startups to thriving as a startup community. Now that might take some time, but we have a playbook to do that, and we've done that in places around the world, and it's super powerful economically for those local communities. So maybe somebody listening wants to be that catalyst, right, in
Mhm.
in their community, and rather than getting a job, create jobs in their community.
And so how does that happen? So like, let's say somebody, let's say Christine wants, has an idea. We contact you, kind of figure it out. She would be kind of the point person. And then I appreciate that you say too, a lot of these take time, which a lot of times you hear from people, oh yeah, right, you make it like right away. But I respect the fact that you kind of hedge it and say, hey, like a lot of these things take time to grow and
Yeah.
gestate, right? And kind of move forward. So you start out like maybe with one person, is that what happens? And then maybe you try to get a second person and then
Yeah, I mean, look, my own story is I wanted to make the startup community better here in Boulder, and I went and
Mhm,
found Brad Feld, who I co-founded Techstars with, and David Brown, who I had
mhm,
formed some companies with before, and a guy named Jared Polis, who was a budding politician at the time, but an amazing entrepreneur. He's now our governor, so things change. But it was a small group of us that said, let's make our startup community better. And that led to me the opportunity to create a $5 million venture capital fund. And, here I am 17 years later, we're, multi-billion dollar asset manager, right? All because I wanted to make my startup community better and invest in the context of that. So yeah, if someone, wants to grow their startup community, there's no reason they can't have a similar story where they get a few people together, they work with us on a startup community partnership. They start running Techstars branded events in their
Hmm.
community. They start plugging into the network. They start maybe investing around it over time. And that grows opportunities around their community. And yeah, that might take a decade or two, but things start to happen quicker than that also.
You mentioned about investing in it. So is there the opportunity for people who say, hey, I don't want to start my own company. I have no interest in that. However, I want to maybe, find a company that I, gel with and I feel like, I get what they're doing and it resonates with me and I just want to invest. Is that possible too?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's part of the whole idea
Yeah.
of this startup community partnership. We're essentially teaching you what we've done in
Mhm.
the major cities that we operate in to allow you to do that in the city that you love or the town that you love.
So would it just be for that city, or can you just go on your site and say, hey, here are some companies that are open to investments, maybe
Yeah,
small investments, and say, hey, Case, like, I think this is going to work, I love this idea, and just invest.
of
Is that,
course. Yeah. So independent of this idea of
yeah.
the local startup community building, we that's what we do. We invest in startups all around the world. We showcase them all around the world in events we call demo days. We have online versions of those. So if you're an investor and you want to deploy capital, you unfortunately have to be accredited,
Mhm.
right? The SEC says that you have to have money to invest in
Like
startups, which is
250,000 or something net
yeah,
worth or something?
I'm no lawyer, but it varies depending on your
Yeah.
situation and your knowledge level.
Yeah.
But you have to certify as an accredited investor. If you do, you can invest in any of the companies that you see coming out of tech startups around the world. And if you're not accredited, I say that's a bummer. There is the Jobs Act. You can do smaller investments
Mhm.
in certain companies. And we're all working to open that up because it's crazy that you have to have wealth to create wealth. You should be able to make small
Yeah.
investments responsibly that can, turn into these huge outcomes. Anyone should be able to do that.
And when you say like, is there usually a certain amount that you would have to invest in there, or it could be a very small amount, or depends on each
Well,
company and what they want?
in the world of accredited investors, you usually don't see check sizes smaller than about $25,000.
Mhm.
So it's fairly significant. Um, with companies that are raising under the Jobs Act, which is kind of, you might know it as crowdfunding,
Mhm.
oh, those numbers can be as low as $100, right? And so the issue is that not all companies raise on crowdfunding sites. In fact, most don't because they prefer
Mhm.
fewer investors that are actually going to help and have a reputation and a network for helping, like venture capital firms. But some startups you'll find on crowdfunding sites, you could put $100 into them.
It's kind of cool, right? Like, and if you
Yeah.
hit the right one, it's like, yeah, this this is great.
Well, and the trick, if anybody's listening and thinking of doing that, and you see what I'm doing, I mean, I'm invested in thousands of companies. Please don't make four investments. It's a great way to lose all of your money. You want to make lots of investments. So figure out the right sizing and make at least, 50 or 100 because it is portfolio theory. You do have 40 or 50 that'll fail for every one that works, right? So the good news is the one that works could be 1,000 times your money.
But the tough part is if it's like 25 grand each, you have
No,
to
that's
have,
true. But if it's $100 each, I'm
then
saying
it's
don't
okay.
go invest $500.
Yeah.
Go invest $5,000, right? $100 at a time.
Oh, so you could do it like just piecemeal, a little bit here, a
Yeah,
bit here.
diversification in any kind of asset,
Mhm.
diversification ends up mattering. Like you don't go to the stock market and pick one company and put all your
Mhm.
money into it. You pick an index fund that diversifies you across all of that. So you need to be conscious of diversification if you're going to be investing in startups.
Now, do you have something like that? Like, where you could kind of, hey, I don't know, I can't figure out, I'm not smart enough to know all these different, startups. Is there just one fund, like an ETF fund or whatever kind of fund to say, hey, I'll just invest in that and have a little piece of everything?
Yeah, Techstars has, I mean, we are a venture capital
Mhm.
platform. We're a multi-billion-dollar asset
Mhm.
manager. We work with qualified investors, which again are, pass a
Mhm.
certain SEC threshold of wealth. That's what we do. We deploy their money for them. We do that for large institutions, family offices. That's definitely a part of what we do. We don't do the crowdfunding bit of that.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's something that you would find like websites online to go and do that sort of thing.
Are there other things that I didn't ask you about that you feel maybe the audience would be interested in hearing about? Because you gave a
Yeah,
great, overview of it. And did I miss anything?
I think the only thing I would say is,
Yeah.
there's some people listening that are interested in the startups, right? Techstars is this really open community
Hmm.
of startup enthusiasts, mentors, investors. Like, you know, please reach out, right? If you want to get involved, if you want to be, building a community where you live, or you want to be investing, or you want to mentor, you've just done
Hmm.
some stuff in your career and you like the idea of helping young startups get going. That's what we do, and we do it in this very open community way. So always love to hear from people that have an interest in what we're talking about.
Now, how is this very different than, let's say, Y Combinator or Well Found or some others, or they're kind of sort of just have everyone has their own kind of vibe to it.
Yeah. Well, Y Combinator is actually another accelerator program.
Hmm.
They operate in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And, I think they do an amazing job. So very
Yeah.
similar approach, but they're more geographically focused on the
Hmm.
Bay Area. That's where they operate and do what they do. And I think we have a belief system that great startups come from everywhere, which is why we operate on the ground everywhere. We try to really focus on 10 company classes, right? Small cohorts. They're a bit more like, they have hundreds of companies at a time going through. And so it's just a different feel, right? It's sort of, what feel do you prefer? But it's similar at the very high level. Well found, I'm actually not very familiar with, so can't speak intelligently on it.
And Wolf Owl used to be like, what was that? It's Naval's firm where,
Ah, okay, like
yeah, so they spun,
AngelList
yeah,
or
exactly, AngelList.
yeah,
So they
yeah.
spun it off, they
Got
rebranded it
it.
as Well
I didn't
Found.
know that
Yeah,
that's what they were calling it. Yeah,
yeah.
Naval's awesome. He's a friend. Angel List was really a way to invest in startups also, but they weren't actually hands-on working with the startups. It was more just, how to deploy capital through a network to reach a company. But I'd say we're much more hands-on than what Angel List was in terms of, or what Angel List is. That's a way to deploy money versus what we're doing is trying to be active with the companies as a co-founder and mentoring them as well.
This is a stupid question, so don't make fun of me. But like with all with so many different companies under your umbrella, like is it like almost every day there's like, oh no, this is happening because it's just large numbers, just how you could succeed with large numbers. But does it get like you get headaches? Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, you have 1,000 different companies. Ultimately
Well,
something's going to always go, crazy.
Jack, one of my favorite
Yeah.
sayings is there are no stupid questions, there are
Yeah.
only stupid answers. So, um, yes, by about 11 o'clock in the morning,
Mhm.
if something hasn't exploded in the portfolio, I start to get curious about what it's going to be, where
Oh,
it's going
so it
to.
does happen then, like on a regular basis, like something
Yeah,
goes,
I mean, look, when you have thousands of companies, like
yeah.
something's going to die today, some deal's going to fall through, some merger, some investment's not going to happen, somebody's going to panic and they're going to call for help.
Mhm.
And, that's okay. That's part of it. Failure is a part of the process. It might be a micro failure or a total failure of the business, but, every day there's going to be something like that. And, the good news is I'm not alone. I'm not the only person here. We're hundreds of people, and you've got a lot of smart people that can help our companies. But yeah, by midday you get a little curious. Hey, nothing's blown up today. I wonder what's going to happen. Yeah.
But then you're waiting for it, like, oh, it seems too good. Everything is just, everything is going so nicely, and then boom. Uh, so where, if you don't mind me asking, like, where do you see it going next? Is it just kind of keep building on it, or do you have any, interesting plans you want to share that's, maybe a little different than what you're doing now to keep it growing and building it?
Yeah, the new thing I mentioned earlier is the startup
Is-
community
Yeah.
partnership thing, where we're really trying to say, yeah, we operate in 16 countries and 50 cities where we have
Right.
people on the ground and we're making these accelerator investments. We're doing that in New York and LA and London and places like that. But we're really trying to expand our network to have more people in more places have a Techstars office, have a Techstars person. So that's really the big new push for us. Our opportunity really is to just continue to make great investments and then continue to back those founders with more and more capital, right? We write this first check and sometimes we write a follow-on check and then they're growing and some of them are raising, $1 billion at a time. We're in a position where we could keep investing in that. So I think our opportunity is really as investors in the long term, but we're big believers in the power of the network. And so we want to grow our network. We want to have more nodes on it, more people attached to it in more communities around the world. And that's kind of the focus right now in the next couple of years.
That makes sense because, Silicon Valley, New York, London, they don't have a monopoly on all the best ideas. You could have it right in Westfield, New Jersey, where you have very smart people and, you have Princeton not far, you have like all these other places that they're really smart people. So you can kind of put it together. So if you go like to a specific area, do you invest like within that area or no, you can invest anywhere. It's just you have the outpost in your location.
Yeah, like in our New York
Yeah.
accelerator program, those companies predominantly will come from
Mhm.
the New York metro
Mhm.
area, but some of them will come from elsewhere because they want
Right.
to connect into the New York investor ecosystem, mentorship ecosystem, talent ecosystem. Sometimes they'll move back to wherever they came from, sometimes they'll stay. So again, this type of activity does draw new blood, new talent, right, to your community, and that's part of growing your startup community over time as well. So yeah, it's a mix, but it often is, predominantly companies from that region at least.
Well, this is great. I really appreciate you taking the time, Dave, to go through because not to be redundant, but I see it firsthand every day that it's so hard for people to get a job, to keep your job, worried about their job. And predominantly, they're always looking at like the big name companies.
Yeah.
And this opens up a door that could be from the way you're describing it. I agree with you. That could really give people that advantage, so they
Yeah.
can. So the people who are knocking their head against the wall and not finding a job, at Meta or whatever, could say, "Hey, I could go to this cool startup, and if I hit it big, this could be freaking awesome. It's life changing, or at least I get a cool job that I like with people I like to work with." So I could see a big value and how this differentiates from other things. And just like alone having 3,500 or so job openings there, got to be one for somebody out there that who's listening,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, and you can go work for a startup and you can
Yeah,
create a startup and
yeah,
organizations like us help you create a startup, right? So rather than trying to find the perfect job, you just create the world you want to live in. That's what entrepreneurship is, and that's what I love about it.
brilliant. Well, I appreciate the time. This is great. And if you don't mind, maybe down the road we can kind of follow up another 6 months or so, see what else is going on, because it seems like you got to keep building and growing. So it's fantastic.
Happy to do it anytime. Thanks for having
Okay.
me.
Oh, thanks, Dave.